Welcome to the Good Faith Bible Studies podcast. I'm your host, Craig Nash, Senior Editor at Good Faith Media. Each episode, we explore and discuss the weekly texts and lessons found in Good Faith magazine. For the July, August, and September 2026 installment of the Bible Studies, I'll be inviting special guests to join me in sharing our thoughts and ideas about the passage and ways small groups might approach each week's lesson. We are glad you're here, so let's dive in. This week's passage comes from Luke chapter 18, verses 1 through 8. Then Jesus told his disciples a parable to show them that they should always pray and not give up. He said, "In a certain town there was a judge who neither feared God nor cared what people thought. And there was a widow in that town who kept coming to him with the plea, 'Grant me justice against my adversary.' For some time he refused, but finally he said to himself, 'Even though I don't fear God or care what people think, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will see that she gets justice so that she won't eventually come and attack me.' And the Lord said, 'Listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will see that they get justice and quickly. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth?'" So as I think of first impressions of this parable, in light of the study we've had this quarter on the parables, this is not the last parable found in Luke, but it is the last one we will look at. And the thing that stands out to me that I imagine stands out to most of you who have kind of gone along this journey with us as we've looked at parables that come out of nowhere, parables that are set up, is that this is one that we have not seen before in Luke, which was neither set up by a certain circumstance, nor did it really appear out of the blue. Instead, Luke alerted his readers for the reason Jesus was telling this parable, which was to teach them a lesson about not giving up. In a way, and this is just kind of being frank and maybe a little bit humorous, this kind of ruins the parable for me, because even if you don't understand it, even though this one is easy to understand, you kind of get the point because Luke told you the point at the beginning, which is to not give up. It kind of makes me think of the books that we've all probably started to read, but we just kind of gave up on because we realized, hey, everything that we need to know about this book is found in the title. And it's usually a really incredibly titled book, but we get all of it from there. So for me, knowing what this is about ahead of time, the question then becomes, what sort of things am I missing about the story? What ancient mechanism is Jesus using to teach this that we may not know at first glance? Is there something we're missing, or is this just intended to be a very straightforward parable? And I will look forward to discussing that with our special guest when we return. Once again, this week's curriculum in Good Faith Bible Studies was brought to us by Jennifer Garcia-Bashaw. Jennifer, as we said last week, is the Associate Professor of New Testament and Christian Ministry at Campbell University in North Carolina, and she is the nerd in residence for the Bible for Normal People podcast, which is, by the way, an incredible podcast if you are looking for ones that not quite as good as this one, obviously, but still pretty reputable podcast. And also, once again, this week, we are joined by special guest, Jason Edwards. Jason's the pastor of Second Baptist Church in Liberty, Missouri. As we said at the end of last week, Jason is also the author of At Home with God, How the Cross Transforms Us. You talked a little bit about that book last week. Remind us the release date of the book.
November 10th, I believe.
Is it so as you know,
somebody told me recently when they ordered it, that they were going to get it on Friday the 13th,
Okay,
which
interesting.
didn't seem like a good omen.
So you know this. Our listeners, if they've been listening for a while, know that I worked in the retail book industry for a good amount of time. It felt like a long time then, but now and over the course of my life, 9 years isn't really that long. But there were books that were what we called strict on sale, which was you could only put it out the day of, and it ensured that there were lines of people out the door, like Harry Potter. I assume yours is like that. Is a strict on sale that there will be lines?
I think they're not expecting anybody to be in line for this book.
Hey, you never? I'm going straight from recording this podcast to stand in line right now.
You should do that
through November.
Yeah.
We encourage you to check out the book. But for today, this parable, as I mentioned, this is the last time we will study the parables for now. Next week, we will begin a 4-week study on the early chapters of Genesis, but we're concluding these parables. I believe I mentioned either in Good Faith Magazine or in this Leader's Guide that we publish online. I wanted us to kind of deviate from the lectionary for a little bit, and I picked these parables because when I was in college, Jason and I actually went to college together. We went to the same college. We overlapped a little bit, but didn't really know each other when we were both students.
Craig was much cooler than me.
Much cooler and much older as well.
That's right.
We were part of a church, and many churches in the Baptist tradition from which we came did these January Bible studies. And Dr. Bruce Tankersley at East Texas Baptist University led a January Bible study in the parables of Jesus found in Luke, and it was really transformative for me. So I've been excited to revisit these the last, I guess, 2 months now. So as we think about this particular parable, Jason, what are some thoughts that you have on this particular parable?
Well, I love one of the things that Jennifer brings out early on, and it may not be a big deal to the listeners, but I think we should always go into these stories with a sense of allowing our own assumptions to be challenged. So I think one of the things that happens, especially when we see Luke's why Jesus told this parable, is that we assume that the judge is God.
Yeah.
And there are several senses in Jesus's parables where we have an assumption about a character being God that we probably could spend a whole Sunday school class going, well, what if it isn't?
Mm-hmm.
And this is certainly one of those spaces where we should question our assumptions about that.
Well, and it's natural that we should, because it says that he does not fear God.
Right.
Nor does he respect people or something along the lines.
Right. And you know, I think because Luke says it's about prayer, we then think, okay, the widow is the one praying, and then the judge is the one being prayed to, and this is how that works. I think we can think a little bit more imaginatively about this, and even think more imaginatively about who the one praying is.
So what would be another option other than the one being the one praying?
Whose prayer might be answered by this widow's request being granted?
Interesting.
One of the things that I kept thinking about as I was looking at this parable is the time that you and I spent in Israel. And something happened there. We talk sometimes, and listeners may know about Lectio Divina, and that is a sacred reading of the text, and often where we find ourselves in the text, or we allow the text to speak to us in a way that it might not normally. What happened when we were in Israel is I found myself in the context of the text, in the places where Jesus lived and taught and what he was talking about. And so you and I were in a few different places where my imagination took off, and I began to imagine Jesus at different ages in those places. And there was something about that made the Bible come alive in a way.
Yeah.
And so I think that one of the things that can help the Bible come alive in our study of it is to imagine things not just within the text, but perhaps the things that are in the text story that we don't see.
Yeah. A little bit of hard turn here to Jennifer's something she said here. I'm curious your thoughts on this idea, so moving on from the judge and to the woman, Jennifer broached this idea that the woman is actually using a tool that is kind of unbecoming in the ancient world, and also, I think, also very frowned upon now. And it's this tool of, well, first of all, it's kind of a twofold unbecoming. One is it's a tool of shame, that she's shaming this judge, and two, that just who she is as a woman doing that. I'm curious your thoughts on that, because I guess I could say I struggle with this, because when we talk about injustice, deep down, I know that shame never changes anyone, but also deep down, I really want to do it.
Yeah. Right. Well, and Jennifer mentions this, one of the biggest things that is present in all of the Gospels that is often unnamed is that it's an honor-shame culture. Yeah. And so the most valuable asset in the culture was honor. And they also believed it's what's called a limited goods society, that there was only so much of something to go around.
Right.
And so if someone had a certain amount of honor, that means someone else had to have not that amount of honor. And so the most important thing was not their assets or any of those things. It was what all of that represented. And so everything is also happening communally. And again, as we imagine the people on the fringes of this scene, we don't necessarily imagine the widow and the judge alone in a room.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because it's a courthouse.
Other people are observing this, and there may be a sense of honor or shame being derived from perception, because honor is always rooted in perception. How is the community perceiving me? And so I think that does have something to do with it, in the sense that while you and I may care about our honor, we don't even have a sense of how much it was the lifeblood of their culture.
Yeah, yeah. Another thing that I should have shared this at the first impressions thing. This is one of those, we talk about this all the time. You can have a lifetime of reading scripture and you still notice something, and there's something so obvious that I missed until I just read this now, which is she's not just asking for just like a general sense of justice. I believe the text, and I don't have it in front of me, says it's justice against her adversary. So there is she's asking for a judgment of some kind.
One of her neighbors isn't cutting the tree.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's not just this, we talk a lot about justice and kind of moderate to progressive kind of communities like the ones in which we kind of reside, but it's often this general idea of justice that, we talk about Christian nationalism and justice. But we don't really stop to think, okay, we're actually talking about a particular thing.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, that kind of jumped out to me. You mentioned Lectio Divina earlier, and you shared something with me that I believe you wrote as a sermon. I think this is probably a perfect way to close this. Not just this particular passage, but also the idea of the parables. In fact, it's almost, I kind of wish maybe you would have joined us the first time we studied this, because this would be a good bookend, this kind of imaginative reading of scripture. Do you mind sharing, first of all, where this came from and then the passage?
Yeah, just what I was sharing with, well, there's one thing I wanted to share with you that's related, but not what I was telling you before, but I think it would be valuable for people as they're studying this in a Sunday school class. And that is, again, to have a sense of imagination about what Jesus is doing here. So one of the ways you can do that, I think, is to imagine, what if the woman in the parable is God?
Yeah, I was going to wonder that as well.
What if the woman is God, and this is a parable about God pleading with us for justice?
Wow.
What if we are the unjust judge? What if the listeners that are overhearing Jesus's parable at that moment in that context are the unjust judge, and it's God in the form of this woman that is pleading with them for justice for those that Luke, throughout his gospel, puts first and foremost, which is the poor, the oppressed, the marginalized. So I think that's one way to think about it.
Yeah, it certainly helps us put last week's parable kind of in clearer view, this chasm between the rich and the poor, the those with and those without, this occurs. The next chapter, there's a little bit happens between these, but yeah. So, and then the second thing.
Well, the other insight, and this actually came, if you want to know where it came from an imaginative reading of the text in conversation with Bert Burleson, who at the time was almost the chaplain of Baylor. Now he's the former chaplain at Baylor. And at the time was about to leave his position as the pastor of Dayspring in Waco. And he and I were having a conversation about this text, and this insight came up as we were trying to think imaginatively about it. So the sermon was about the dream of God or the kingdom of God, and these stories were personal to Jesus. He told them about real people in the midst of real people. Luke tells us that the story of the persistent widow and the unjust judge took place in, quote, a certain town. That's a funny way of putting it, don't you think? A certain town? I'd be willing to bet my paycheck that certain town was Nazareth. Did you know that Jesus' mother was a widow? Most scholars believe that Joseph died at some point before Jesus left home. So my money says that there was a teenage boy in this story standing next to his widowed mother in that courtroom, watching her as she begged for justice and mercy. Perhaps her son felt guilty. He knew that she wouldn't even be there if not for her desire to provide for him and his brothers and his sisters. So imagine how he might have felt as he watched her beg. And now imagine how his heart must have swelled in that moment when that cold-hearted judge delivered a verdict of mercy. His eyes must have widened a bit that day as he looked into the face of his own mother and saw something more. Yes, this dream was personal for Jesus. He felt it deep within his bones.
That is beautiful. And as I think through ways that groups can not just approach this, but maybe review the last few weeks, the last 2 months we've been going through these parables, is go back and look at each one and maybe think through, hey, where might we have missed this possibility that Jesus had been telling an actual story that had actually happened? That might be a good kind of in-between exercise between what we've been doing and what we will start doing next week, which is we will begin with the beginning next week with Genesis 1. So this has been an excellent time. Jason, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah.
And we will be back next week. I'm Craig Nash, and you've been listening to the Good Faith Bible Studies podcast from Good Faith Media. Our music comes from Pond 5. If you are not already a subscriber to Good Faith Magazine, learn more about how you can receive a copy of the magazine and Bible study curriculum at goodfaithmedia.org.